I can't believe my own blood would trade my life for money." That sentence cut deeper than any wound I had faced in decades. Betrayal doesn't always come from strangers. It often comes from the people you love most, the ones you raised, the ones you trusted. When the people closest to you decide your worth is measured in dollars instead of dignity, the fracture it leaves never truly heals. And that's where this story begins, with a holiday meant for joy, shattered by deceit so sharp it threatened everything I had built. Before we dive into today's story, I recommend you hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell, so you never miss a new story filled with drama, resilience, and unexpected twists. If you enjoy this video, type 1 in the comments. If not, type 0 to let me know how I can make better content for you. Now, settle in, get comfortable, and maybe grab your favorite drink, because this is a tale you won't want to miss. Let's get started. Snow fell steadily that Christmas Eve, soft white flakes layering over the rooftops of Boulder and settling against the dark outline of the Flatirons. From my front porch, the house looked warm and welcoming, strung with lights that glowed against the night. Neighbors driving by might have assumed the Donovan family was about to enjoy a perfect holiday gathering. Inside, I kept my face set in polite cheer, but there was a weight pressing down on me that had nothing to do with age or weather. After 68 years, I had learned to trust instinct, and tonight, mine was restless. I had only recently closed a chapter that had defined my adult life. For decades, I had been a firefighter, then a fire chief, and finally, the man who built a construction company from scratch. Just a month before Christmas, I sold that company for $12.5 million. People congratulated me on the fortune, but the truth was, money never felt like safety. I'd seen too many tragedies to confuse wealth with peace. I was proud of what I had accomplished, but pride does little when the house feels empty after your wife is gone. Holidays remind you more than anything else of who is missing. Tyler, my son, insisted we celebrate at my house. He said it was important that I be surrounded by family, that I deserved one night of joy without responsibility. His wife, Brooke, echoed him with a smile so polished it belonged in an ad campaign. Brooke was 32, stylish, always posting photos of their lavish dinners or Aspen getaways. Normally, she scoffed at housework or cooking, but this time she transformed into what looked like the perfect hostess. She directed decorations, hired a jazz trio, and set a dining table so meticulously arranged it looked ready for a magazine cover. As the rooms filled with the smell of cinnamon sticks and pine garlands, guests began to arrive, neighbors bundled in scarves, my old firefighter buddies still carrying the weight of years of service, a few business associates who remembered me from the early days. Brooke's mother, Lorna, appeared in a sparkling red dress, already scanning the house with pride as if she owned part of it. Tyler kept moving from group to group, checking his phone often, but plastering on a wide grin. I stood by the mantelpiece, my hand brushing against the wooden carving my late wife had loved, and let my eyes roam the room. Everything was in place, the band's soft chords, glasses clinking, laughter echoing, and yet my gut felt the way it had before walking into a smoke-filled house. You can't always see the fire, but you know it's there. Brooke moved gracefully through the kitchen, arranging the champagne flutes on a silver tray. I knew those glasses well. They had belonged to my wife, a gift from her sister years ago. Crystal clear, delicate, fragile, in a way I never liked but respected because she did. Among them was one with a tiny chip on the rim. I had always avoided it, more out of habit than danger. But tonight, Brooke placed that chipped glass slightly apart, as if marking it. My eyes lingered on her hand, watching the way she adjusted its position, then glanced at me before turning back to her guests. I reminded myself of Tyler as a boy, running across our backyard with a paper fireman's hat, or sitting at the kitchen table with his homework while I came home smelling of smoke. I remembered Christmas dinners when my wife's laugh filled every corner of this house. That house was gone now, replaced with Brooke's carefully curated perfection and Tyler's strained attempts to live a life bigger than his paycheck. They drove cars they couldn't afford, lived in a house I'd helped them secure, and spent money as if debt were imaginary. I'd helped them more times than I should admit. Still, the heart wants to believe the best of its children. I tried to push aside the unease and reminded myself this was Christmas, but the longer I watched Brooke, the more that uneasy instinct grew. She was smiling too much, checking her reflection in the polished silver, clutching the tray with both hands as if afraid someone might snatch it away. The jazz band slid into a slower melody. The hum of conversation softened, and Brooke stepped toward me. She carried the tray high, her smile poised, and with deliberate care she lifted the chipped glass. "For you, Frank," she said, her voice lilting, her eyes never leaving mine. I accepted it with steady hands, though inside my chest something tightened. The chipped glass felt heavy between my fingers, the rim catching the light. I smiled, nodded, and raised it just enough for appearances. No one else in the room noticed the significance of that tiny imperfection, but I did. I thought of every fire I had commanded, every moment when hesitation meant disaster. I looked at Brooke, then at Tyler laughing too loudly across the room. My mind settled with the calm of someone who had faced danger before. Whatever game was being played tonight, I would not panic. I lifted the glass slightly higher, smiled for the crowd, and thought, I will drink slowly. If you're still watching and finding these insights helpful, please comment number 1 below to let me know you're with me. Now let's move on to point number 2. The music shifted into Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas, the kind of tune that should have wrapped the evening in comfort. Guests swayed gently, glasses in hand, their voices humming along as if the whole neighborhood were inside my living room. Children darted around the tree, the ornaments catching sparks of light from the fire. On the surface, it was every Christmas postcard brought to life. Yet I stood there with my champagne flute, not drinking, feeling like a man watching a play where he already knew the tragic ending. Brooke moved near the drinks table, her movements smooth and deliberate. At first glance, she looked like a proud hostess showing off her holiday spread, but I caught the flick of her eyes left and right, as though checking if the spotlight was on her. Then she slipped a hand into her purse and drew out a small amber vial, no larger than a thumb. She tilted it over the chipped glass, the one she had placed out earlier, and I saw a clear liquid slide into the champagne. My chest tightened. It was subtle, almost invisible, but I had responded to enough medical calls as a fire chief to recognize the precision of someone dosing rather than decorating. Every instinct told me to shout, to knock the glass out of her hand, to stop the game before it started. But years of emergencies had trained me otherwise. You don't run into smoke yelling before you know where the fire is burning. If I exposed her in front of everyone, I risked looking like a paranoid old man, maybe even confused. That kind of label could be just as deadly as poison if it made me seem incompetent. As I kept my expression steady, Tyler slipped beside me, an arm over my shoulder, his voice pitched low. "Dad, promise me that after New Year's you'll move into Pinecrest Lodge. You'll be looked after there. It's time." I nodded faintly, hearing only the way his words lined up with the glass Brooke was preparing across the room. I had lived long enough to know coincidences were rare. My son thought he was offering care. All I could hear was control. Moments later, Brooke appeared, tray balanced carefully, her smile polished. She held out the chipped glass as if she were presenting a royal gift. "For you, Frank," she said, eyes fixed on mine. I accepted it, the crystal cold against my fingers. The chipped rim caught a flash of light from the chandelier. Behind my calm face, my mind calculated options. I could refuse outright, but that would reveal I'd seen too much. I could drink and hope I was wrong, though hope was never a survival strategy. Or I could bide my time, let the snake think it had cornered the mouse. I turned the glass slowly, studying the imperfection. "For photos," I said casually, "this chip won't look too good. Why don't we swap?" Before Brooke could object, I lifted another flute from the tray and offered the flawed one back. There was the briefest hesitation. Her eyes flicked to Tyler, then back to me. Perhaps she feared refusing would expose something worse. She forced a laugh, clinked my glass with hers, and brought the chipped rim to her lips. She swallowed, smiling tightly, then set the flute on the table, as if eager to forget it. It didn't take long. Within minutes, she paled, one hand gripping the back of a chair for balance. "I think, my sugar's low," she murmured, excusing herself. She vanished toward the bathroom, leaving behind a ripple of confused whispers. Guests exchanged awkward glances. The jazz band raised the volume, trying to smooth over the sudden hole in the evening. I stood in the middle of it all, my expression sympathetic, my thoughts razor sharp. The plan had misfired, but the danger was far from gone. If Brooke had been willing to go that far in my house on Christmas, I could only imagine what came next. Reaching for my phone, I typed a message under the table. Possible poisoning attempt. Call me. I sent it to Alicia, the one person I trusted with my affairs. My thumb hovered a moment before hitting send, but once it was gone, I felt steadier. All around me, the party went on. Laughter, toasts, cheerful chatter. But I smelled smoke where no one else did. And I knew exactly where it was coming from. If you're still here, drop a number 2 in the comments so I know you're following along. Things are about to get even more intense in the next part. The night unraveled quickly after Brooke excused herself. At first, I thought she might compose her face in the bathroom mirror and return, but the sound of her heels clattering unevenly across the hardwood floor told a different story. When she reappeared, her complexion was ashen, her hands trembling. She tried to steady herself by gripping the edge of the dining table, but her knees buckled. Conversations froze, laughter stilled, and all eyes turned toward the young woman who had just been the glowing hostess of the evening. Her mother, Lorna, rushed forward, her voice pitched with panic. "It must be the seafood appetizers." I told her oysters never sit well. She fanned Brooke's face uselessly with a napkin. Guests muttered theories. Too much wine, a fainting spell, nerves. No one wanted to acknowledge the darker possibility that had already taken root in my mind. Tyler knelt beside his wife, fumbling for his phone. "I'm calling 911, he stammered, but his eyes kept darting toward me, as if measuring my reaction. I crouched near Brooke long enough to see her lips flecked with foam, a detail I tucked away carefully. She whispered something incoherent before slipping into a shallow faint. While Tyler struggled with the emergency dispatcher, I crossed to the sideboard and lifted the open bottle of champagne. A faint bitter scent rose from its neck, nothing a casual guest would notice, but to me it was unmistakable. Years of fire calls had brought me face to face with the strange smells of burned chemicals and tainted food. This was not the natural effervescence of good champagne. I swirled the liquid gently, letting the sharp trace coat the rim of the glass. My suspicion hardened into certainty. The paramedics arrived within minutes, their boots crunching snow as they carried equipment inside. Guests parted nervously, some whispering about leaving early. The jazz trio, in an unspoken act of courtesy, kept playing a lively tune to soften the tension, though their eyes flicked constantly toward the scene. The lead medic checked Brooke's pulse, fitted an oxygen mask, and asked what she had consumed. "Champagne," I said firmly, setting the bottle within his reach. "You'll want to take this along." Tyler interjected, his tone sharp. "She's hypoglycemic sometimes. It's not necessary to make a big deal." The medic ignored him, noting vitals, securing Brooke to the stretcher. The bottle was bagged and tagged as if fate itself had chosen sides. Watching her carried out beneath the curious eyes of neighbors and colleagues was almost surreal, like a theater play stumbling into tragedy mid-scene. On the porch, as the ambulance pulled away, Tyler caught my arm. His face was pale, but his voice carried an edge. "Dad, don't push this. Brooks have been stressed. Mom-in-law is fragile. We don't need the police sniffing around." I met his gaze without speaking. Silence can be more damning than words, and in that moment, my quiet refusal told him I wasn't about to let this go. He let his hand drop, then turned back toward the departing lights of the ambulance. Later, when the house had emptied and the snow muffled all sound, I sat in the glow of my study. I replayed the footage from the security cameras I had installed out of habit, remnants of an old firefighter's caution. Frame by frame, I watched Brooke at the drinks table, the vial in her hand, the careful tilt as she poured into the chipped glass. The red napkin concealing the bottle slipped for a moment, enough for the lens to catch. I froze the image, zoomed in until her fingers and the amber glass filled the screen. My stomach clenched, not in fear, but in the cold ache of betrayal. She had done it calmly, as if she had rehearsed, a hostess serving death with a smile. I saved the stills to a secure folder and sent them to Alicia with a short message. Evidence attached. Call in the morning, then I drafted another text to Mateo Ruiz, a man whose skills in following paper trails and hidden accounts had served me well once before. Need a full check on Tyler and Brooke, debts, insurance, anything unusual, urgent. Leaning back, I rubbed my temples. The faces of my late wife and young Tyler swam in memory, a boy who once raced across the backyard wearing a toy fireman's helmet. I heard her voice as clearly as if she were beside me. Trust your gut, Frank. It kept you alive this long. She was right. My gut told me tonight was no accident. Brooke hadn't acted alone, and Tyler's eyes on me during her collapse confirmed more than he intended. The champagne, the chipped glass, the sudden push for Pinecrest Lodge, it all aligned into something poisonous that went far beyond a holiday misstep. I glanced once more at the still image of Brooke tipping the vial. She did it with confidence, I whispered to the empty room. This wasn't her first rehearsal. Tomorrow morning, I would meet Tyler, not to accuse outright, but to see how deep his part ran. And as I planned my next step, I realized the fire was spreading through my own family, and I was the only one prepared to fight it. The morning after the party dawned gray and brittle, the kind of cold that settles deep in the bones. I drove to the cafe attached to the old fire station, a place that still smelled faintly of diesel and overbrewed coffee. Sitting there, surrounded by the echoes of my past, I almost forgot I wasn't meeting a fellow firefighter, but my own son. The photographs on the wall, black and white shots of crews battling infernos, reminded me of who I used to be, a man trusted with the lives of others. Now, I was a man forced to question the life of his own child. Tyler arrived looking restless, his coat unbuttoned despite the chill. He dropped into the chair across from me, avoiding my eyes. I slid my phone across the table. On the screen was a still frame from my security camera, Brooke leaning over the champagne glasses, her hand partly covered with a red napkin, the amber vial visible in the crease of her palm. He studied it for a beat too long before shaking his head. She was adding flavor, orange oil. You know, Brooke, she likes little touches. I kept my voice calm. Then why the chipped glass? You know I always avoid it. All the time. Tyler shifted, his knee bouncing under the table. Dad, you're overthinking. The point is, you shouldn't be living alone in that house. Pinecrest Lodge is safe, reliable. You'd have people around all the time. That's what matters. There it was again, the pitch, the urgency under his words. My son sounded less like a concerned child and more like a salesman desperate to close a deal. I leaned back, letting him feel I was listening. Maybe you're right, I said. Let's discuss it with Alicia. We can sort the details together. Relief flickered across his face. He thought he had won ground. What he didn't realize was that agreeing to his suggestion was just another way of charting the fire exits before the building collapsed. That afternoon, I sat in Alicia's office, the dark wood and clean lines offering the sense of security I needed. I laid everything out, the video, the champagne bottle, Tyler's insistence about Pinecrest Lodge. She listened, her pen scratching notes in quick, precise strokes. We'll set up a living trust immediately, she said. And here's the critical clause. If anyone attempts to question your competency, the assets divert automatically. Half to the firefighter scholarship fund, half to a medical victims charity. That makes challenging your independence far less profitable. I felt the weight in my chest ease slightly. And the evaluation? I'll schedule a geriatric specialist for next week, she replied. An independent exam will certify your sound of mind. Once that's on record, it's almost impossible for anyone to claim otherwise without looking fraudulent. By the time I left her office, I felt more like myself again. An old firefighter doesn't just hope the fire goes out, he builds fire breaks. That evening, Mateo called. His voice carried the kind of gravity that meant bad news. Frank, it's worse than I expected. Tyler and Brooke are drowning, credit cards maxed, over $80,000 in debt. Their house has been refinanced twice, the equity line drained. Her interior design boutique is bleeding money. I let out a long breath, though I had suspected as much. And? The big one. Brooke took out a $400,000 life insurance policy on you 4 months ago. She listed herself as the beneficiary, claiming she was your caregiver. It slipped past the company because of the family connection. I gripped the phone harder, my knuckles whitening. It wasn't just desperation anymore. It was premeditation, paper trails, signatures, all of it designed to profit from my death. After hanging up, I sat alone in the study, the house quiet except for the tick of the clock. I thought about the years I'd carried Tyler on my shoulders, the tuition I'd paid for my grandson, the down payment I'd handed them when they said their dream house was out of reach. I thought about the way generosity had slowly turned into expectation. Somewhere along the line, kindness had been mistaken for weakness. The betrayal cut deep, but grief sharpened into clarity. My son and his wife had rehearsed this. They had built a plan with layers: poison in a glass, paperwork in a drawer, a nursing home contract waiting. And now, they would believe I was leaning toward their side. When I met with Alicia again the following morning, I slid the insurance documents Mateo had uncovered across her desk. She studied them, then looked up. "They think they're clever," she said. I allowed myself a small smile, cold but resolute. "Then let's be cleverer. They want to play games with my life. Let's make sure they're playing by my rules." If the tension has kept you watching, comment number 4 to show you're still with me. The story is only getting sharper from here. I invited them back into my home a week later, presenting the meeting as a formality, just a chance to finalize the paperwork for Pinecrest Lodge. Snow fell in heavy sheets outside, muffling the street noise, while I arranged the living room as if preparing for an ordinary family gathering. Tyler arrived first, his face tight with anticipation, carrying a leather portfolio under his arm. Brooke swept in beside him, dressed with deliberate elegance, her hair pinned, her smile too rehearsed. Lorna followed, chattering about the weather, filling the silence with needless words. Finally, Dr. Harold Keene stepped through the door, briefcase in hand, the faint air of superiority clinging to him like cologne. We sat together in the glow of the fireplace. Tyler leaned forward, eager, and Keene began his gentle patter about ensuring dignity in aging, while unfolding a set of forms. "Just a few short questions," he said, producing a notepad. The questions were simple at first: name, date, place. I answered with calm precision, then volunteered an unasked detail. The year 1989, when my crew responded to a warehouse fire near Pearl Street, and I carried a boy out just as the roof collapsed. The specificity made Keene blink. Brooke fidgeted, her eyes darting toward Tyler. "Can't we move this along?" she asked, her voice edged with impatience. Tyler slid the stack of papers onto the table between us. "Dad, this is the power of attorney. Standard stuff. Once you sign, we can handle everything. Bills, medical needs, the entrance fee for Pinecrest. You won't have to worry about a thing." I lifted the pages with steady hands. On the surface, they looked legitimate, but I had come prepared. My lawyer, Alicia, had drafted a decoy version, nearly identical in appearance, but granting control only over a single dormant account containing $1. I laid that version back down with quiet finality, letting Tyler believe he was about to take command. Before anyone could press me, I picked up the remote and turned on the television. The security feed from Christmas flickered across the screen. There was Brooke at the drinks table, the red napkin in her hand, the amber vial glinting as she tipped liquid into the chipped glass. The room fell silent except for the hum of the fire. Lorna gasped, clutching her pearls. "It was essential oil!" "She adds it to everything for fragrance." Brooke's face flushed as she forced a brittle smile. "Really, Frank? Editing videos now?" I said nothing. The footage looped again, undeniable. Alicia, seated quietly at the edge of the room, cleared her throat. "The champagne bottle from that night has already been tested. Results will be here shortly." Right on cue, the doorbell rang. I opened it to reveal 2 detectives from Boulder PD. Their coats dripped with melting snow as they stepped inside, announcing their warrant. Detective Morrison held a folder. "Mr. Donovan, we've confirmed the champagne from your party contained aconitine, an extract from monk's hood." highly toxic. The hospital toxicology on Mrs. Brooke Donovan showed the same compound. Tyler's face drained of color. He turned toward Brooke, eyes wide. You said... His voice trailed off. Brooke stiffened. I don't know what they're talking about. He's setting me up. The second detective opened another file. We also discovered a notarized contract submitted to Pinecrest Lodge last week. It bears Frank Donovan's signature, only it's a forgery. The mobile notary admitted being paid to overlook discrepancies. Records tie the payment back to Dr. Keene, who has also been linked financially to Pinecrest's parent company, where Mrs. Lorna Peterson holds investments. Lorna shrieked, I had no idea. I didn't... She sank into a chair, trembling. Keene's composure cracked. This is absurd, he sputtered, but the detectives had already stepped closer, asking him to remain seated for questioning. I folded my hands, letting the silence speak for me. If anyone doubts my clarity, I'll submit to any test, medical, cognitive, forensic. I have nothing to hide. Brooke's eyes burned with fury. You think you've won? This isn't over. The detectives began separating them. Their voices clipped and professional. Papers lay scattered across the table, fraudulent signatures, decoy documents, and evidence no longer confined to suspicion. As I watched, the storm outside deepened, wind rattling the windows, snow piling higher. It struck me that Christmas had delivered gifts after all, just not the kind they had expected. The living room had never felt so heavy. The fire hissed in the hearth, throwing light against the officers' uniforms as they led Brooke and Dr. Keene outside. Brooke's fury followed her like smoke, her eyes locked on me with a venom I had never seen before. Keene muttered about malpractice and confidentiality, his words drowned out by the crunch of boots on snow. Lorna stayed behind, collapsed on the sofa, her hands trembling as she clutched her coat. Tyler remained standing near the window, shoulders hunched, staring at the snowfall as if it could offer him an escape. For a moment, silence stretched between us. I sat in my armchair, steady, the weight of decades in my chest. I thought of the fires I had commanded, the men I'd ordered into danger, the decisions that determined who lived and who didn't. Those choices had always been clear. Rescue who you can, contain the flames, never hesitate. But here, with my only son standing across from me, I felt a confusion no fireground had ever given me. Tyler turned slowly, his face pale and raw. Dad, he began, his voice breaking. I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know she tried to poison you. I thought, his breath hitched. I thought the plan was just the nursing home, just making sure you were safe. I let his words hang. He took a step closer. Brooke told me you were slipping. Forgetting things. She said you'd sell the house for pennies or get conned. I just wanted to protect you, that's all. Protect me. The words cut. I had seen enough in my lifetime to know when someone was telling only part of the truth. Memories surged. Tyler on my shoulders at the 4th of July parade. Tyler handing me a hand-drawn card after his first baseball game. Tyler as a teenager demanding car keys with that same pleading look. A father's instinct is to shield, to forgive. But the man before me wasn't a boy asking for guidance. He was a grown man who had stood by while his wife plotted my end. Show me your phone, I said quietly. His eyes widened. What? Your phone, Tyler. Now. Reluctantly, he pulled it from his pocket, unlocking it with trembling hands. I scrolled through the messages, my heart sinking with each line. Brooke, convince him he can't live alone. He'll cave faster if he feels vulnerable. Tyler, he's stubborn. What about the insurance? Brooke, trust me, I'll make it look like an accident if I have to. The screen blurred for a moment, my hand tightening around the device. I looked up at my son, the boy I had raised, the man who now stood with his shoulders caved in like a guilty child. You knew, I said, my voice flat. Maybe not the vial, maybe not the glass, but you knew enough. Dad, he choked. I never wanted you hurt. I thought, I thought she just meant to scare you, to push you toward the lodge. I set the phone down on the table with deliberate care. You were ready to sacrifice me for comfort. That's not protection. That's betrayal. Tears welled in his eyes, his face crumpling. Don't destroy my life, Dad. Please. You're all I have left. I felt the ache in my chest sharpen. Part of me wanted to reach across the space and pull him close, tell him we could fix this. But the seasoned part of me, the commander who had carried bodies from burning buildings, knew better. Fires only grow if you feed them. And I had been feeding Tyler's weaknesses for years, mistaking my indulgence for love. No, I said finally, my voice calm. You destroyed your life yourself. I'm just refusing to go down with you. The words seemed to hollow him out. He sagged into the chair opposite me, burying his face in his hands. For the first time that night, I saw not anger or greed, but despair. And yet, pity couldn't rewrite the truth. He had chosen his side long before I ever pressed him. The detectives re-entered, shaking snow from their coats. Mr. Donovan, are you ready to give a full statement? I nodded. Every detail. As they prepared the paperwork, I looked once more at Tyler. My son, my blood, slumped and broken, still hoping for a reprieve I could no longer offer. In that moment, I understood the hardest truth of fatherhood. Sometimes love means drawing a line, even if it leaves scars. The fire had already consumed too much. I would not let it take me, too. If you can feel the weight of this decision, type number 5 in the comments to let me know you're still on board. Now, watch how it all unfolds. The house felt emptier after the squad cars left, their red and blue lights fading against the snow. I sat alone in the silence, the echo of slammed doors still reverberating through my chest. Brooke had gone in handcuffs, her beauty stripped away by fury. Dr. Keene had left in shame, protesting his innocence even as officers cataloged evidence. Lorna stayed behind for a time, weeping into her gloved hands, insisting she knew nothing, that she was only a bystander. But ignorance was not absolution, and when she finally slipped out into the night, the house fell into a deeper quiet than I'd ever known. Tyler hadn't been cuffed, but the detectives had taken his phone and warned him not to leave town. His face had been a portrait of collapse, eyes downcast, lips trembling, hands clasped together like a boy waiting for punishment. Watching him unravel broke something in me. I wanted to see my son as the child who once brought me hand-drawn Christmas cards, but all I could see was the man who had bartered my life for financial relief. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked from room to room, my slippers brushing against hardwood floors that had borne decades of footsteps. In the kitchen, I saw the faint scratches where my wife used to chop vegetables. In the living room, the indentation of her favorite chair. Upstairs, Tyler's old bedroom still carried echoes of baseball posters and model airplanes. Every memory felt heavier now, laced with betrayal. My wife had once warned me, don't confuse love with blindness. I realized too late how often I had done exactly that. By morning, the neighborhood was buzzing. Word travels quickly in a town like Boulder. Neighbors stopped me at the mailbox, their voices hushed, but eyes wide. They had seen the flashing lights, the paramedics, the officers escorting my daughter-in-law. We're so sorry, one woman whispered. Family troubles are the hardest. I nodded politely, unwilling to feed their curiosity, but I knew the truth was already spreading. Calls came from my old firefighter colleagues too. Hardened men who had faced burning buildings struggled to find words. Your own family? One of them muttered. That's a hell no one prepares you for. I told them I was fine, that the system would handle it, but the hollowness in my voice gave me away. Later that day, prosecutors met me in Alicia's office. They laid out the picture clearly. Brooke would be charged with attempted murder, facing up to 15 years if convicted. Dr. Keene was under investigation for fraud and professional misconduct, his license already suspended. Tyler, they said, could not escape. His messages and financial ties made him complicit. Conspiracy charges were on the table. I listened, my jaw tight, my heart sinking with every word. When Alicia slid the printed emails across the desk, my last hope withered. In black and white, I read my son's plans. Once Dad is relocated, I can manage the assets. Brooke says the insurance payout will cover our debts until then. The words struck harder than any flame I had ever faced. It wasn't just weakness, it was intent. My son hadn't merely been manipulated, he had joined the scheme willingly. I left the office in a daze, the cold air cutting against my skin. Driving felt automatic, my hands guiding the wheel toward the cemetery without conscious thought. I parked beneath a bare oak and walked the familiar path to my wife's grave. Kneeling in the snow, I brushed frost from her name. I couldn't save him, I said aloud, my breath visible in the air. I saved myself instead. The admission hurt, but it was true. Tyler had crossed a line no father could pull him back from. Standing there, I remembered her voice, clear as bells on a winter morning. Strength isn't holding on. Sometimes it's letting go. For the first time in days, I felt a measure of peace. That evening, Alicia called again. Court dates were set, hearings scheduled. Tyler might take a plea deal, but prison was certain. Brooke would not escape judgment. As I set the phone down, I looked out across the snowy garden, the roses long dead for the season. My family, as I had known it, was gone, burned away by greed, by desperation, by betrayal. All that remained was me, standing in the ashes, determined not to be consumed. The drive back from Alicia's office was quiet, the snow muffling every sound as though the whole world had gone still. In my passenger seat sat a folder of documents, legal language, and signatures that represented the final barrier between my life's work and those who had tried to steal it. Family ties once felt like the strongest rope binding me to purpose. Now they seem fragile as thin glass, easy to shatter, and dangerous once broken. Trust, once cracked, never truly heals. Inside the house, the silence was different than it had been the week before. It wasn't only loneliness anymore, it was clarity. I set the folder on my desk and poured a cup of black coffee, letting its bitter taste anchor me. For the first time in weeks, I felt I was steering again, not simply reacting. The next morning, Alicia and I met once more to finalize everything. She reviewed the trust structure, her pen tapping against each clause. Your estate is now fully protected. If anyone attempts to challenge your competency, the assets move automatically to charity. Tyler and Brooke are excluded by name from every directive. Her tone was firm, reassuring. I nodded, signing each page carefully. Each signature was another wall between me and the schemes that had nearly consumed me. It was bittersweet, of course. A man shouldn't have to build a fortress against his own son. But here I was. Later that afternoon, Mateo called. His voice carried the blunt weight of bad news. Frank, more has surfaced. Tyler's been funneling money to consultants, one of them a psychiatrist willing to sign off on incompetency claims. Payments started months before Christmas. This wasn't rushed. It was planned. I closed my eyes, gripping the phone tighter. So, they built this step by step. Exactly. If the poisoning failed, they had legal scaffolding ready to trap you. It was layered. I thanked him, then sat in my study staring at the flicker of the fireplace. The revelation didn't shock me anymore. It only confirmed what I already knew in my gut. They hadn't stumbled into desperation. They had rehearsed it, built it brick by brick. In the days that followed, support came from places I didn't expect. Old firefighter friends called. Some even dropped by with casseroles or whiskey. They didn't ask for details, just sat with me, reminding me of the kind of loyalty forged in fire and smoke. One old colleague, Hank, patted my shoulder and said, "Sometimes the brothers you choose outlast the sons you raise." The words struck deeper than he knew. The truest test came in the form of a phone call. My grandson Noah's voice cracked through the line, trembling. "Grandpa, I'm so sorry. I swear I didn't know what they were planning." He was only 16, caught between loyalty to his parents and the horror of their choices. I softened, my chest aching. "I know, Noah. None of this is on you. I just don't want you to think I'm like them," he whispered. "You're not," I said firmly. "You have a choice to be better. That's what matters." After that call, I realized I wasn't just protecting myself. I was protecting the future of someone who still had time to learn that love wasn't about money, that family meant more than inheritance. At night, when the house felt too large, I began journaling again for the first time in decades. Old habits returned, like writing incident reports after a fire. I laid out the facts: Brooke's vial, Tyler's texts, the forged paperwork. Then I wrote my analysis: betrayal born of debt and greed. Finally, the lessons learned. Generosity must have boundaries, and survival requires vigilance, even against those closest. It was painful, but it brought order to the chaos. Putting words on paper reminded me that I was still in command of the narrative. One evening, I poured a glass of scotch and sat by the fire. The house creaked softly, wind rattling the windows, snow piling high outside. I lifted the glass toward the flames and whispered, "The fire is contained. Now I rebuild." The words weren't dramatic, they were a vow. I had faced backdrafts, collapsing beams, infernos that could devour a man whole. This was different, but the principle was the same. Control what you can, let go of what's gone, and live to fight another day. If the struggle for a new beginning resonates with you, comment number 6 below. Let's move forward together into what comes next. The courthouse smelled faintly of polish and old paper, a blend of formality and history that pressed on everyone who walked its halls. I sat in the back row of the courtroom, steady in my chair, watching as the people who once called themselves my family faced judgment. Weeks had passed since the night of the poisoned champagne, weeks of interviews, depositions, and preparation. I had already fortified my estate, my health records, my security. What remained was this: the law putting words to what I already knew. Brooke was the first. She entered in a pressed suit that tried to disguise the reality of shackles on her wrists. She held her chin high, but her eyes flashed with a rage that betrayed her composure. The prosecutor laid out the evidence: the toxicology reports, the insurance policy, the security footage of her pouring from the vial. The jury needed little time: guilty, attempted murder, and insurance fraud. The judge's voice echoed in the chamber as he delivered 15 years. Brooke's composure cracked. She turned, glaring at me across the courtroom, her lips curling. "This isn't over," she hissed, as deputies led her away. I met her gaze with silence. Fear had long left me. Dr. Harold Keene followed. Once smug, he now looked deflated, his suit rumpled, eyes sunken. Testimony revealed his financial ties to Pinecrest Lodge, the falsified evaluations, the bribes. He lost his license permanently, his career crumbling in public view. He would face fines and possible jail, but the greater punishment was the ruin of a reputation he had built over decades. Lorna fared differently. She avoided prison, claiming ignorance, but her name was blackened in every social circle she prized. The whispers of betrayal, the humiliation of her daughter's crimes, ensured she would never again sip champagne at a country club without being judged. Watching them, I felt nothing. No triumph, no pity, only distance. Tyler's hearing was the hardest. My son entered pale, his shoulders slumped, his suit hanging loose on him. He had struck a deal, his lawyer announcing a guilty plea for conspiracy in exchange for reduced sentencing. 3 years in state prison. As the evidence was recited, the texts, the emails, the forged paperwork, he stared down at the table, unable to meet my eyes. I sat unmoving, torn between sorrow and cold resolve. This was the boy I had once taught to fish, the man I had bailed out of debts, the child I had believed would carry my name forward with pride. Now he was a defendant, stripped of illusions, his reputation and finances burned to ash. Through it all, I remained steady, like a fire captain watching a blaze consume a structure that could not be saved. There was no use running in after it. The flames had already claimed too much. Listening to lawyers argue over my name, my fortune, my competence, I realized I had survived not only an attempt on my life, but the end of a family myth. Blood ties may bind, but they do not excuse betrayal. When the gavel fell and the hearings ended, I stepped outside into the sharp winter air. Snow swirled across the courthouse steps. Reporters called my name, cameras flashed, but I walked past them, silent. My story was no longer theirs to consume. It was mine to carry. In the weeks that followed, I focused on rebuilding. My estate plans were updated permanently. Every document carried my signature and the safeguards Alicia had crafted. Mateo continued to monitor my accounts, ensuring no shadow lingered. But beyond the paperwork, I turned toward people who still mattered. Noah visited on weekends, his eyes carrying both grief and determination. He asked questions about firefighting, about resilience, about how to start again after the worst. I answered each one, grateful to offer him something better than the inheritance his parents had tried to steal. My firefighter brothers rallied too. They came with casseroles, with jokes, with quiet companionship. They reminded me that chosen family can outlast blood. Their loyalty was a balm. Slowly, the hollow in my chest began to close. One quiet morning, I walked through my garden, the snow thick but the ground beneath promising spring. The rose bushes stood bare, their thorns sharp, their beauty dormant but waiting. I ran my hand along the wooden trellis, remembering my wife planting them years ago. Life, like fire, destroys, but it also renews. I stood there, breath clouding in the cold, and whispered to myself, "The fire didn't take me." I walked out alive. And in that moment, I knew I wasn't just surviving, I was beginning again. The storm had passed, though the air around me still carried its chill. My life was no longer the same, but I was still here, and that mattered more than anything else. When I looked back over the weeks of betrayal, police reports, and courtrooms, I didn't see vengeance as the theme. What I saw was survival. A man tested in the cruelest way possible, standing upright when those closest to him had fallen into their own fire. Money had been the spark. I learned quickly that wealth was both a shield and a target. The fortune I built wasn't evil on its own. It was what greed in others turned it into. I once believed giving freely was an expression of love, but generosity without limits, I learned, can breed entitlement. My support for Tyler and Brooke had been meant to lift them up, yet they came to see it as advance payment on an inheritance they thought they deserved. That lesson will stay carved into me like a scar. Help is noble, but unchecked help can become fuel for betrayal. Trust, too, is fragile. I gave mine to my son because that's what fathers do. I thought love was enough to blind out warning signs. But love without vigilance can become weakness, and weakness invites exploitation. I should have remembered what my wife told me years ago. Trust your gut, Frank. My gut had never lied to me in burning buildings, and it hadn't lied when Brooke smiled too brightly, when Tyler insisted too eagerly. Age does not equal incompetence. Wisdom, earned in decades of fire and loss, is sharper than any quick scheme. I know now that resilience is not about avoiding hardship. It's about facing betrayal, disgrace, and loneliness, and still getting up in the morning. People my age are often told to step aside, to surrender our independence. But I stand here as proof that 70 years don't make a man powerless. They make him seasoned, prepared, and ready to fight with tools younger generations don't yet know how to wield. When I think of who I want this lesson to reach, I picture people like me, men and women over 50 who have given everything to family, who believe their sacrifices will be repaid with respect. I want to tell them, don't assume loyalty is guaranteed. Protect what you've built. Put safeguards in place. Trust your instincts when something feels off. Love your family, yes, but remember that love should never require you to surrender your dignity or your independence. And yet, even as I close the door on Tyler and Brooke, I see hope in the future. My grandson Noah calls often now. He asks questions about firefighting, about courage, about how to rebuild after disaster. He is young, but he listens. He wants to learn. That gives me strength, because it means the cycle of greed and betrayal doesn't have to continue. He can choose differently. He can carry forward the lessons his parents ignored. I intend to make sure he does. I walk through my garden most mornings. The roses look dead in the snow, their thorns bare, their stems brittle, but I know better. Come spring, they will bloom again. That is resilience. Scars and seasons don't mean the end. They mean renewal. I look at them and see myself. Scarred, yes, but not broken. ready to rise again when the time is right. People often say revenge is sweet. They imagine satisfaction in seeing others punished. For me, the sweetest revenge is something else entirely. It is living well, standing tall, and ensuring those who tried to harm me gain nothing. It is knowing Brooke will spend her prime years behind bars, that Tyler must live with the consequences of his choices, that my fortune will help causes worthier than their greed. But more than that, it is knowing I can sleep at night with peace in my heart, not hatred. The truth is simple. Family may fail you, but your strength, your principles, and your choices define who you are. I am not the man my son thought could be tricked into surrender. I am not the old fool my daughter-in-law thought she could poison. I am still Frank Donovan, firefighter, survivor, father, even if my son no longer deserves the title of son in my heart. I raise my glass some nights, not in bitterness, but in quiet pride, and I whisper the truth I've earned. I may be old, but I am far from powerless. That is my message. To anyone who listens, to anyone who doubts their worth as the years stretch on, never forget. Age may bend your body, but it sharpens your mind, your instincts, your resolve, and those are the weapons that carry you through the flames. In the end, what remains after betrayal and turmoil is not the bitterness of wounds, but the clarity of lessons learned. Life has a way of testing the boundaries of our strength, sometimes through battles with fire, and sometimes through the quiet, corrosive flames of deceit. It reminds us that survival is not simply about breath in the lungs or years accumulated. It is about standing firm when the foundations we once trusted collapse beneath us. Wealth, legacy, and family bonds can all be double-edged. Money itself is neutral, yet it exposes character. For some, it becomes a tool of generosity and growth. For others, it becomes a magnet for greed and manipulation. The painful truth is that what we give freely can be twisted into entitlement when boundaries are blurred. To live wisely is to understand that generosity must be paired with discernment. True strength lies not in endless giving, but in knowing when to protect what has been earned with a lifetime of sacrifice. Trust, too, carries its own fragility. It is built slowly and shattered quickly, leaving shards that cut deepest when they come from those we once held closest. Yet even in betrayal, there lies a hard but valuable lesson. Trust should not mean blindness. Love is precious, but it must be balanced with vigilance. To ignore intuition is to hand power to those willing to misuse it. Listening to that quiet inner voice, the one sharpened by years of experience, can mean the difference between ruin and survival. But perhaps the most enduring truth is this: resilience is ageless. Age does not strip away power, it deepens it. The seasons that bend the body also sharpen the spirit. Endurance comes not from avoiding hardship, but from rising after it strikes. To reach later years is not to fade into weakness, but to embody the strength of endurance, the wisdom of foresight, and the courage of boundaries. There is a unique dignity in proving that time may slow a step, but it also tempers resolve like steel forged in fire. Even in the ashes of disappointment, renewal is possible. Just as a winter garden appears barren only to bloom again in spring, so too does the human spirit carry the potential for rebirth. Painful endings clear the ground for wiser beginnings. Betrayal may wound, but it also cuts away illusions, leaving behind truth and clarity. What rises from that clarity is a new foundation, one built not on naive trust, but on grounded wisdom and the courage to guard what truly matters. And so, the message is simple yet profound. The best revenge is not punishment or anger, but dignity. It is living well, holding fast to integrity, and refusing to let those who sought harm define the story. Survival is not merely about outlasting threats. It is about shaping life afterward with strength, peace, and purpose. For anyone who has faced betrayal, who has felt age used as a weapon against them, let this truth settle in the heart. You are not powerless. The years that stretch behind you are not burdens but tools, lessons, instincts, scars that protect you. You are more resilient than those who underestimate you could ever imagine. And sometimes, the most powerful victory is not in defeating others, but in proving to yourself that you can still rise, still thrive, and still stand unbroken. These turning points remind us that setting boundaries and valuing ourselves is not just an act of courage, it's the foundation of living with dignity. Now, I'd love to hear from you. What's one lesson from this story that you feel connected to, and how will you apply it in your own life? Let's grow together by sharing our thoughts. If this story resonated with you, drop a 1 in the comments. If not, feel free to leave a 0. Your feedback helps us improve. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that touch the heart and spark reflection. Thank you for watching, and here's to living life with strength, honesty, and authenticity.